Question is about is outside of children's Sunday school class. When was the last time you heard about Noah's Ark?
Me?
Yeah.
I go to work and I live a simple life. I don't do much.
So the answer is you haven't outside of children's Sunday school class.
Probably not too much.
Why is that? Think about that for a second, right? We are no longer a young class, right? So there's children's Sunday school class, which if you weren't saved as a child, you missed. And then the Ark Encounter, if you went, because what's that all about? Or you heard it on the radio. Our churches are missing a whole valuable section of what's being talked about in God's Word, right? And one of the things that's being attacked, right? Creation gets attacked, the virgin birth gets attacked, Noah's Ark gets attacked. That wasn't real. But our church, the people in our churches, outside of children's Sunday school class, what they were taught, and if they are Christian enough to listen to the radio or go to the Ark Encounter, there's a whole big gap in there that we're not being told about, right? Evan.
What's interesting is Hollywood likes to make movies about those big stories from the Bible.
Right.
And as an adult, if you don't remember what you learned way back in Sunday school, it's like...
Well, and then here's the other question. Is what you were taught in children's Sunday school correct?
Right.
Right? What is your vision of Noah's Ark? Unfortunately, a lot of us have gone to the Ark Encounter, right? But as a kid growing up, what is your picture of the flood?
Giraffe sticking up out of the ark.
Sure, you got the big giraffe poking out. What's going on? Elephants, everybody's hanging out. Because that's what make good children's pictures, right? Because if you just showed the ark, every kid's going to go, wee, that was great, right? So they got to, kid it up. But that's what you're thinking. You're thinking small ark, bunch of animals. What else? What did you learn as a kid? How did the flood happen? Lots of rain. 40 days of rain, right? Okay, great. Randy.
About suppression of Christianity. I get a lot of stuff and say, don't go to that church because it believes these people, these politicians. And I say, no, they don't. It's a house of worship. Can I go to a house of worship and call it a church because it's a house of worship? Just because some people believe in things I don't necessarily believe in doesn't mean I can't come to church and pray.
Mm-hmm. Correct. All right. Very good. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 6.
I would say overall in our society, because of the great push of evolution, a lot of people have been so brainwashed, they don't deal with the Noah Ark.
Yeah. What? There's a huge gap then that you're just skipping over because, well, I don't know. I don't know why it is. We know that the Bible is God's word. We know that what is in the Bible is true. But sometimes we as Christians are guilty of treating them as stories. And they're not. And I don't know whether it's we don't remember back to children's Sunday school. We don't know of Noah's importance or just what the deal is. But I thought about that. I was like, last time I heard about that in a church setting is Sunday school. Why don't we talk more about creation than we do about Noah? There's more chapters dedicated to the Bible about Noah and the flood than there is about creation. Wow, Rick. Yeah. But it's important, isn't it? Genesis chapter 6. Let's look at verses 14 through 16. Evan, can you read that for us?
Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, The breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set it in the side thereof with lower. Second and third stories shalt thou make it.
All right. So here we go. We have a physical description of the ark. What do we know about the ark? Dimensions. Dimensions are what? I meant more specifically the numbers. I like that, though. All right, so you got 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. What's a cubit? Foot and a half, right? Somewhere, depending on whose arm you're using, or whether you're using the arm and the hand breadth, it's somewhere between 18 and 22 inches, right? So if we figure out to be around 20 inches, how long is this? About 510 feet, okay? 50 cubits high is going to be about 85 feet high, wide. And 30 cubits high is about 50 feet high. Is that little or big? That's big, right? That's a big thing. In perspective, they say that this will hold 522 railroad stock cars worth of cargo. All right? 522 railroad cars. Now, who wants to wait for that kind of train to go by? Not me, right? Railroad cars. Okay, very good. What else do you know about it? What does it tell you? What's it made out of? Gopher wood, right? Nobody knows what gopher wood is. But it is wood, right? People guess, but they don't know what gopher wood is. Noah used it all. It's all gone, right? Peter? Yeah, they hold a lot, right? Very good. All right, what else do we know about it? It has rooms. Clint. Oh, who hasn't, sorry, not Clint yet. Who has, no, you didn't. You haven't gone to the Ark Encounter. Okay, so when you picture the Ark, the inside of the Ark, what do you think of? What comes to your mind? What was that experience like? Yeah. You're Noah. You shut the door. You picture rooms? Okay. Who else has not gone to the Ark? What do you picture? What does that mean to you? Like little stalls or something? Okay. Sure. Barn stalls. Evan, what do you think of?
Pretty much the same thing. That's what I would picture. It's just a big open floor with a bunch of wooden stalls dividing the animals.
Big open floor. Peter?
Gully or gutter to take the muck away.
Oh. Oh, come on, Peter. Some sort of removal. Yeah.
Gives you weight on the bottom that way.
Hate to be the animals on the bottom. Randy.
I'm not a carpenter, and I hope the day does not come where we can't talk like this.
Yeah.
We can't talk about what we believe in. Someone come tell you cannot come to a church and say these things that we are totally absurd. All the creatures there are into that thing. The world is coming to that.
Yeah. Darlene? Okay, so there's storage. There's a woman thinking about storage room, right? right? Storage, right? There's food. Did you think about that? As a kid, did you think about that? No.
Just a big room with...
Yeah. Everybody just get in the ark. It's all big opened, run around, everybody's willy-nilly, right? That was the funniest thing, I think, that one of the things that I thought about when we went to the Ark Encounter was, spoiler alert, bedrooms? Really? Y'all had bedrooms? And an office? Or a craft room? You know? Because you got to think, though, what are they doing? They're living there. What do you mean you got a kitchen? What? You should be happy you're not on the flood. You know? The other thing that's... Yeah. Satellite. That's why the giraffe is always sticking out. He's got the antenna. Right? But one of the things that was amazing was that we're not told about it in the Bible. But when you go to the Ark Encounter, they're like, wait a minute. There is a way to get fresh air. There's mechanisms for fresh air. Well, what? Why would you think about that as a person, right? You also got to think, right, the window, which nobody mentioned yet, but that is described here, right? There's a window that's there. What's that for? For light. There's Noah, his family, and all the animals huddled in a corner in the dark for a year. That's not the way it was, right? What's interesting too now is, if you think about what we've gone through in the last couple of years, quarantine and whatnot, right? How would you like to be trapped for a year? Oh, well, wait a minute, we were. What did you wish you had had? Right? That's another reason why the size of the ark is the way it is, because they say that the ark is overbuilt for the number of animals and people that should be on it. Right? What, did Noah and his family sit still the whole time? Right? Did the animals just sit there hunkered in the corner going, all right, we'll wait this out for a year? No. They had to move. Noah had to take Elephant for a walk. Where is he going? Right? So there's a bigger picture there than what we typically are told of as little kids in Sunday school class. Right? Let's see with that. Clint mentioned it. Mentioned the pitch. What's the pitch? What's it for? Waterproofing. Waterproofing. Now, I have a special treat for y'all today that we have a video. It's a little lengthy video. It's about 14 minutes long. But it talks about, Mark talks about the construction of the ark, right? And the planking system that was used, right? So you take the planking system that was used and you take the pitch that was applied to it, both inside and out, right? And it dispels a lot of the, well, there's no way that Noah's Ark could have floated being a wood boat being that big, right? So before we get too far, why don't we get into that so we make sure we get that in. So I'll move this out of the way so everybody can see. Let's not run over the microphone. There we go.
The proportions in the Bible are very realistic. So realistic that those proportions happen to match a modern cargo ship. And we wouldn't expect that. If that was a made-up story, we wouldn't expect them to accidentally come across 300 by 50 by 30 cubits as the proportions of this imaginary vessel. For example, when they make cargo ships, 50 by 30 would be just the typical proportion you'd see in the cross-section of a cargo ship. Gives you about the right stability, not too much, not too little. In fact, those proportions are so good that one of the naval architects that I've been working with, he actually realised that Genesis was literal because of those proportions in Genesis 6:15.
The Bible is quite specific on the Ark's dimensions, but it doesn't go into detail regarding its shape. The only possible allusion to the Ark's shape in the Bible would be the Hebrew word teva. Some have claimed that the definition of this word is box, but that's not necessarily true.
The word for ark in the Bible is teva, which nobody knows what it means. Teva only appears twice in the Bible. It appears for Noah's teva, and also there's the teva for Moses' baby basket.
In Hebrew vocabulary, as in any language, the meaning of a word is more and more precisely understood the more often it's used in different contexts. But when it's only mentioned a couple of times like that, we have a God anointed and approved imagination to fill in the details that are not given by the understanding of the exact word itself.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean box, because Moses' baby basket was just a little basket.
Tim Levitt, a mechanical engineer and supervisor of the Ark exhibit at the Creation Museum near Cincinnati, began his quest to come up with a possible description of an Ark design that would complement Noah's shipbuilding abilities.
What was the technology like at that time before the flood? Well, there are a couple of clues in the Bible. First of all, the long lifespans. If a person lives for centuries, they're going to be very competent. They're going to be great at a lot of different things. Also, they're very healthy. To live that long, it implies that you would be a very healthy person, good concentration, healthy body, etc. So you're very capable and able to output a lot of work.
The Bible makes it absolutely clear that the first people in this earth were the most brilliant people. Technology, of course, had not increased to the extent it has today, but the intrinsic brilliance of man is such that even Tubal-Cain, long before the flood, was an inventor of every cutting instrument of brass and iron.
We would expect that the technology was probably a similar level to ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, China, for example, and perhaps similar to the pre-industrial revolution in Europe.
Noah, with the available technology and tools and help available to him to build this, over the 120 years that God gave him, was perfectly capable of building such a gigantic bark.
Working with two naval architects on the other side of the world, Tim quickly discovered that the familiar box shape would not fare so well at sea. The flat sides and bottom would give the passengers a very rough and even dangerous ride. Tim built several 6-foot models for some open water testing. One of his models was built to the specifications of a PhD naval architect. The model turned and aligned with the wind, in contrast to the box-like boat that rocked sideways on the waves. He took this discovery and applied it to his proposed model of the Ark. Was this a logical model based on information given in the book of Genesis?
The first question is, what were the conditions like for Noah's Ark? Was it dead calm, or were there waves, wind, etc.? Well, there's a number of clues in the Bible. The first clue is that Noah had to build something that looked like a ship. It wasn't just any old shape, it looks very ship-like. That 300 by 50 by 30, that's a big clue. That looks like a ship. So we're expecting the water to act pretty normal. It's like the ocean because we're building something that looks like a ship. There's other clues as well. For example, in Genesis 8:1, God sent a wind, and wind creates waves. The Bible doesn't specify a wind-catching feature on the Ark, but it does tell you a relatively long hull, and that is not exactly what you would expect. If you were just designing a vessel to float on the water, you wouldn't make it so long. It takes more work to build it long, it takes more wood, and it's more of a danger as it crosses over waves that it could break. What makes the most sense is that the vessel was built for comfort as well as strength and capacity and sea keeping. So you have to balance all these factors together. In order to make it comfortable, you want that ark to be running through the waves, not side onto the waves, which it would fall into naturally. There's a number of ways to do that. All you need is any sort of wind obstruction on one end. Could be a sail, could be a building, could be a wooden fin. But I wanted something which was low maintenance. I didn't want sails that they had to look after. So if we just build a wooden fin to catch the wind on one end, and at the other end I wanted something that would catch in the water. And the usual way to do that is to have a thing called a skeg, which acts like a rudder at the back of a ship.
Once Tim had completed his Ark model, he noticed a remarkable resemblance to ancient ship designs.
What I ended up with was something that looked familiar. It looked a little bit like the designs of ancient ships, such as the Greek triremes and more ancient ships. What I noticed on the ancient designs is they had high stems. And a lot of the very ancient ones had high stems on one end and an extended mysterious appendage on the other.
Were the features in these ships leftover technology from Noah's Ark itself? We can't say for sure, but it's possible that the storm weathering design that Tim developed for his Ark is seen on some of the earliest ships.
Historians who've been studying ships have found these appendages at the back of ships. Now, some people have thought that they were prototypes of the Greek ramming bow, but this is at the back, not the front. This stern appendage is called a mystery if you don't know what it's for. But if you view it as part of a storm-keeping package in conjunction with a high stem at the other end, then it makes perfect sense. So maybe these ancient shipbuilders knew exactly what they were doing. Or maybe they were just copying features from Noah's Ark, which they'd seen their fathers and grandfathers do.
What about the construction of the Ark itself? How could such a large wooden boat hold together, especially in rough seas? A recent documentary produced by the BBC scoffs at the idea of a wooden vessel 300 cubits long.
According to Tom Vosmer, an expert on ancient boats, not even 19th century engineers could have built an ark that big out of wood alone. Even 19th century boats had steel frames inside wooden frames.
The problem with a 450-foot boat made of wood is that the wood as a material cannot maintain the shape of the boat, and the boat would start to distort at sea, the seams would open up, and it would sink.
It's a safe bet that a wooden ark that size would have sprung hundreds of leaks along the length of its huge hull and sank like a stone.
One of the things that seems to bother people who are against a literal interpretation of Noah's Ark is the scale of the Ark. One of the things that they say is you can't build a wooden ship that big. In the same breath, they would usually pick some ships from 100 years ago, maybe the 18th, 19th century sailing vessels, and say, well, they had trouble getting boats longer than 330 feet or so therefore it's impossible for ancient people to build Noah's Ark.
An ingenious construction method seen in ancient shipbuilding that used edge-jointed planking puts the BBC's faulty claims to rest.
In this exhibit of the Ark under construction, we're treating the planking as exactly the same way as the Greeks did the planks. When Greeks built their ships, the large ships, they used to use multiple layers of planking. And they had this special trick where they had joints in between each plank. And you can see the joint here, they're a tenon, and they fit into a mortise in the adjacent plank. And that locks the two planks together. There's no way they can move, there's no way that they can break a seal and let the water in. This is a very advanced technique. In fact, it wasn't even seen at all in any of the ships built in the last few centuries in Europe and America. We believe this method would allow the ship, the Noah's Ark, to be built without any problems at all with movement of the planks and leaking, which did plague some very large wooden ships. Interestingly, wooden nails, called tree nails or trunnels, are actually a very successful way to join planks to the frame. The reason these work so well is because, first of all, they're a nice big diameter so it doesn't dig into the wood. But what happens is, when water hits the wood expands, seals off the hole and makes it impossible to remove. Now that's a lot of work. It's too much work for the shipbuilders in 18th, 19th century. They weren't going to bother with that. And that's why their ships used to loosen up. In fact, they used to call the ship a tight ship, because when they first started it was nice and tight. All the joints were held together because they hammered the cotton and they hammered the caulking in between the planks, which made the ship tight. But after a while it became, well, a loose ship. The ancient Greeks, however, had much higher quality in the hull. They built the hull with planks that were mortise and tenon, throughout thousands of mortise and tenon joints. It doesn't take any high technology, it just takes more labour.
I'm sure many people have heard of the phrase, thinking outside the box. When we're used to seeing something and someone changes it, for many of us, we just don't like change. And some of us rebel against that. That's why when I've had people come into the Creation Museum and see the slightly different shape of Noah's Ark, it's almost like, this is terrible, this is awful, you can't change what Drs. Morris and Whitcomb did.
We're really just following in their footsteps, developing new ideas based on more information as we research Noah's Ark as a real vessel in real history.
Noah's Ark, real ship or child's plaything? The Bible clearly teaches that it was a real account. But are we correctly teaching this to our children?
One of my pet peeves is opening up children's books and seeing the account of Noah's Ark, Noah's flood, and looking at a picture of Noah's Ark looking like an overloaded bathtub with giraffes sticking out the chimney about to sink at any moment.
It makes sense in a children's room to paint Noah's Ark in a cartoon style. It's friendly and bright and exciting. But there's a dark side, and that is that these children grow up into adults, and on their way, all they can remember is this cartoon picture of the Ark.
What happens today is we have whole generations who are growing up in the church and they sort of look on what they're taught from the Bible as just a group of stories. Because when they go to public schools, the majority do go to public schools, even from the church, they're taught about dinosaurs and they're taught about fossils and they're taught about the Grand Canyon, and they sort of get the idea, what you're taught at school, that's real. But at church, we learn about these Bible stories. And one of these Bible stories is about Noah's Ark. And it was a cute little ark and a cute little bathtub ark and so on. We need to teach children that Noah's Ark was a real boat, just as the Bible describes it.
I like the part too with the boat, where if you just make a box, think about that though. If you're Noah and his family and those animals and your boat's going like this, pass, right? Okay, who's ever been on a cruise? Yeah? How would you like a boat doing that all the time? Oh, it was. And was that enjoyable? No? How about for a year? No, she's like, pass, I'm out, thanks. Ian? Yeah, you've been all right. Right? Think about all that had to be in there. If the animals are flying around being tossed from side to side, right? With people and pots and pans and food and everything going all over the place, Peter's gutter isn't going to make any difference. It's all going to be on the walls, right? All right. So yeah, let's see, what else do we got here? They mentioned that the fact that there was a wind in Genesis 8:1 is where that comes in. Genesis 8:1 says, "And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged," right? So we know that there was wind, so we know that wave issue was going to be a problem. It's a good thing that God gave Noah the plan, because God knew, hey, there's going to be wind later for you. you might want some smooth sailing with this, right? Okay, very good. What else we got going on? Another thing that's talked about is the number of animals. You couldn't have that many animals in the boat, right? One of the other things that is often questioned is how many of each kind of animal went onto the ark? Who's? 7 of the clean, 2 of the unclean, right? 7 and 2, right? And that's what we're taught. That's what we're taught in Sunday school, right? That's what everybody knows. 7 of that kind went in, 2 of that kind went in. Is that right? Peter?
I believe I've read it over the years. That's 7 couples and 2 couples.
Okay, so now it's couples. Okay, let's take a look. Genesis chapter 6, verse 19. Genesis chapter 6, verse 19 says what, Shirley?
And every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female.
Okay, so here we have our first in 6:19, we have our first reference to 2, right? But you got a male and a female. All right, well, that's convenient. What does chapter 6, verse 20 say? Wife?
Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive.
All right, very good. So again, we have our 2 reference, okay? But it also then tells us what kinds of animals. So Noah didn't have to bring fish into the ark, right? Okay, because that would be silly, okay? But what's interesting at the end of verse 20, what happens? God brought them, okay? Why? Why is that interesting?
How can Noah go corral them all, chase them all down?
Yeah, right? He's not some sort of animal wrangler, right? Okay, Randy?
Faith and believe in this and believe in something rather than nothing. No God. Hey, I believe in that rather than believe in something.
Mm-hmm.
Not, even though they're going to have some questions and they can argue all the day long.
Sure.
But they always will find an answer for something you say.
Yeah, they like that, right? Okay. Well, if we go back to why the world is being destroyed in the first place, in the beginning of chapter 6, what's part of the reason why the world's being destroyed in the first place?
Including the animals.
Right? All flesh, including the animals. So what type of animals did God bring?
The ones that he made.
Right? So much like Noah, these are the ones that are going to be pure in their generations, right? Okay. Genesis chapter 7, verse 2. Mark, can you read that?
Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, and the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female.
All right, very good. So there we have our couples, right? The male and his female. Male and his female is 2, right? Male, his female is 2. So if you go 2 plus 2 plus 2 is what? I'm sorry, was that too fast? Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it, right? So that's 3 couples. Number 7 is an odd. How does that work? How do you have an odd with a male and his female? Maybe you brought half of each, right? Okay. So what is happening here, right? It's 7 couples, right? Okay. Verse 3 says what? Valerie, can you read that, please?
Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth.
Okay, so again, it's telling you 7, but yet it's a male and a female. So you're dealing with 7 couples, not 7. Okay. Verse 9. Chuck, can you read that, please?
There went in 2 and 2
Okay, so how did the animals come to Noah? In what quantity? In pairs, right? So they had like assigned seating. This is your lab partner and you're going over there, right? That's what's happening here. As couples, 7 sets of couples, they're going into the ark. They're being brought by God into the ark. Randy. Yeah. Yeah. That's what part of what faith is all about, right? Verse 15. Ian.
They went in, and they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life.
All right, very good. So again, we have our couples being brought by God to Noah, entering into the ark 2 at a time together, right? Verse 16. Clint.
They that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in.
All right, very good. So again, we have the male and the female reference there. So these guys are all coming in as couples. 7 couples, right? So how many of the clean animals are actually going in? 14. Good job with that. And then how many of the unclean? All right. We know who our homeschool teachers are. Good job, Clint. Right? Okay, that's what's happening there. What are we taught, though? What are we taught in Sunday school? 1 male, 1 female. But as kids, we don't think, right? Because what happens in Genesis chapter 8? Genesis chapter 8, verse 20. What happens there? Okay, so God brought 2 of each kind of animal into the ark, and then at the end of the flood, Noah sacrifices 1. What would that leave? What was the point then of bringing them? Right? Think about that. Okay? All right, very good. So, then they also talked about how it's kinds that were brought, not species. Right? So, they use dogs as an example because there's way too many kinds of dogs, right? And all the different brands of dogs that there are, right? It's not 14 of each dog. That would be ridiculous, okay? But 14 of the dog kind. Sorry, thank you, Peter. Right? Very good. Thank you, Peter. That was good, though. I like that. Right? He's right. Right? But how many of you have ever done those, I think it's biology, those charts with the genes and how your traits get handed out and those kinds of things? Right? And how many different combinations there are from just a mother and a father, right? And it spans out from there. Well, the same thing happens here, right? So the getting of the different, what we would think, what I call dog brains, right? From there is easy to span out over time, all right? We talked about the size of the ark, that it was a lot longer, bigger than what is actually needed for the number of animals that are being brought. They're thinking that only a few thousand animals actually needed to be brought, maybe up to like 35,000 animals, right? That's like a really big zoo, literally, right? But I mean, how much space does a zoo take? Especially if you take out the polar bear exhibits and the water ponds, because I don't think they had that in the ark, right? Rick, you had your hand up?
To answer the question about Noah sacrificing, after a year, you would think that they were going to have babies. So that they could probably have more. Definitely.
Right? Okay. That's an interesting question where it talks about, well, you think, what animals do you picture that are being brought? Right? The big full-size elephant? No. It's the The younger, the one that's going to live longer, the one that's going to procreate more, right? You talk about your dinosaurs, right? And, where's T-Rex on the ark, and how does he fit in? Well, do you think they're bringing T-Rex in? No, they're bringing little T-Rex in. You got to understand that the egg of a T-Rex is about the size of a football, which means they don't start out 50 feet tall, right? There's a whole big time range in there to get to 50 feet tall. Peter.
And though they may have been corrupted and some of them were eating flesh, if he brought the pure ones, they would have been vegetarian.
Correct. And actually, they weren't eating flesh then. It says that. It does until after the flood, then that changed. Which is interesting then, okay? The amount of food then that has to be brought for all these animals tells you what then about the animals? You're not going to guess, so I'll just tell you. One of the theories is that God brought all these animals to Noah's Ark, but then put them into a hibernative state, right? And they just slept for a whole year. No, right? Okay. God had Noah bring food. It says in 6:21. 6:21. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee. And that's where it stops, right?
And for them.
And for them. What does that mean, Chuck?
You're feeding the animals.
They're feeding the animals while they're sleeping. Right? Because that's how feeding works. No, right? So these animals are clearly up, right? They're being fed. What happens to an animal after a year of laying around? Think about your polar bears or your grizzly bears that hibernate all winter. What happens to them? Very weak condition, sickly, right? What happens after that? Skinny, right? What kind of animal is needed to procreate the earth after that? Right, exactly. And hibernation is a season, right? A winter season. And they come out looking like that. Do it for a year. See what happens, right? That's not what happened there, all right? So those lies that you can be told, you can prove out of God's word that they're not true, all right? And with that, we'll have to conclude our epic adventure through God's word today.
All right, you are just